Hi, everyone. Dear Congresswoman Hart, dear Congressman McDermott, dear Lord Mayor Dr. Keller from Düsseldorf, dear Lord Mayor Westphal from Dortmund, dear Mr. Wegener from Auslandsgesellschaft, distinguished guests from Düsseldorf, Dortmund, and all over the world. My name is Benjamin Becker. I'm the Managing Director of Americas North Rhine-Westphalia, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of Americas North Rhine-Westphalia and our cooperation partners. They are the Europe Direct Information Centers from the cities of Düsseldorf and Dortmund, the Auslandsgesellschaft in Dortmund, and the U.S. Association of Former Members of Congress. Big shout out to Sharon Wittif over there across the Atlantic. Thanks to everyone involved, especially my colleagues here in the office, but also the colleagues of the other offices, and in particular, my colleague Katharina, who handles technical things in the background. Wouldn't be possible without you. Now on this panel, last year we started an ambitious new format. We had a one-week speakers tour with two former members of the US Congress, one from the Republican Party and one from the Democratic Party. This program was exceedingly well received, if I may say so myself, especially the large town hall meetings in Düsseldorf and Dortmund. This, of course, with high people in-person attendance is not possible in the midst of this pandemic, but we are very thankful and thrilled that this year's program can happen in a digital form, which has its advantages. We get to hear voices from two former members of the US Congress virtually 5 minutes after this past historic US election. And we get to reach a very large virtual audience. Over 200 people have signed up tonight, and at a time when discussion and explanation are much needed. I'll leave it at that, and I'll hand over to my friend and moderator, David Patrician, who navigates us through this discussion in a minute. But before that, it is my great honor to present to you video messages by the newly elected Lord Mayors of Düsseldorf and Dortmund. They were just elected a good month ago, less than a month ago, and but they immediately both said that they want to contribute, and they would have welcomed us in person would this have been possible, but now it's in a virtual sense. It's Dr. Keller from Düsseldorf, he's from the Conservative Party, and Mr. Westphal from Dortmund, he's from the Social Democratic Party. So quite fittingly, two different party backgrounds, just as tonight's panelists. Now that's true bipartisanship. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I will start with Dr. Stefan Keller, the new Lord Mayor of NRW State Capital of Düsseldorf, and I'll present him to you now. Dr. Keller, please.
Dear Congresswoman Hart, dear Congressman McDermott, dear Mr. Westphal, dear Dr. Becker, dear Mr. Wegener, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you from the capital of North Rhine-Westphalia, Düsseldorf. It would have been my pleasure to welcome you personally on this occasion. However, since events like this are not possible due to the corona pandemic, I am pleased to be able to join you online, shortly after taking office as the new mayor of Düsseldorf. I would like to thank the organizers of this event for their intense efforts to continue the transatlantic dialogue even in difficult times. Continuing the good cooperation between the America House and the city of Düsseldorf in the future is a matter of great importance to me. Internationality has long been a hallmark of Düsseldorf. The city is known worldwide as an international economic and trading center at the heart of Europe. Düsseldorf is also a growing urban city with great quality of life. A large international community lives and works in the Düsseldorf area. The peaceful and harmonious coexistence of people from around 180 nations is one of Düsseldorf's strengths and is characteristic of the city. With the US Consulate General, a large US community, and roughly 250 US companies, Düsseldorf is an important USA location in Europe. Before the pandemic, Düsseldorf also used to be a popular travel destination for US Americans. The USA occupy a leading position among our visitor countries. I hope that this will be the case again very soon. This event takes place at a time when we are facing major challenges in our cities and around the world. The best way to overcome them is by working together. The coronavirus pandemic, for instance, is currently demanding all our strength and attention. The issues of climate change and global migration also tasks that can only be solved globally. Every one of us is asked to make a contribution. This requires multilateral, international cooperation at eye level. In Europe and globally, we must tackle these issues together. This also requires a solid, trusting transatlantic relationship at the local level. The city of Düsseldorf is working on this, regardless of who holds the office of US President. Still, we naturally followed the outcome of the US presidential election very closely. We are confident that under the presidency of President-elect Joe Biden, we will be able to strengthen transatlantic relations institutionally and personally. Düsseldorf will continue to work on strengthening European-American cohesion at the local level and promoting mutual trust and understanding. I will also commit myself personally to this purpose. I am looking forward to this, just as I greatly look forward to working with our US partners and friends.
There it is. Thank you. Thank you. Mayor Dr. Keller. And now I will hand over to Mr. Wegener from Auslandsgesellschaft, who will introduce the Lord Mayor of Dortmund, also because he knows him personally. Over to you, Mr. Wegener.
Dear Benjamin, thanks a lot, and thanks very much. A very warm welcome here from the Foreign Society, from the Auslandsgesellschaft in Dortmund. I would like to thank all our participants tonight, Melissa Hart and Jim McDermott, and even for sure David Patrician, our moderator. We are really curious what we will hear from you tonight. We see the news from the United States at the moment with a kind of incomprehension. We hope for a peaceful transition. What will happen with the Republican Party? So you see, we have many questions and we expect many answers from you tonight. Thank you for this. And now please welcome the very new elected Lord Mayor of Dortmund, Thomas Westphal. Thanks a lot and have a nice evening.
Hello everybody and a warm welcome to you all. At first to Melissa Hart and Jim McDermott. It's an honor for us that you join us here in this way of communication, in this digital kind. Communication matters, that's true. And actually more than ever, I'm sure. For that, I'm noticed that the German, maybe also the European point of view about the new situation in the United States of America after this election is maybe completely different to the point of view in the US. Maybe you can say the Europeans or also the Germans didn't understand the tremendous change of political structure and political culture and also of change in the US society. But for that, I would say it would be naive to think Trump is away and all the issues and all the problems are gone with him. That's not true. Obviously not. But maybe you know Joan C. Williams and her impressive works about the US society. I would like to quote her simple message. She said, "When you leave the 2/3 of Americans without college degrees out of your vision of the good life, they notice. And the arrogantly dismiss of the working class," she said, "is a recipe for the extreme alienation among these people." We have to stop, that's my words to you, we have to stop the alienation, both US and Europe. And if we want to create a new political culture beyond the Trumpismus, we have to talk about these issues. How is the right way to take a society together and not to spread them. And I'm sure for this moving in a better world, the great old party is just as important as the Democrats are. And they all, both, have to create a new collaboration, maybe a confederation between the professional class and the working class in the US society. Because that's the way to find a new kind of consensus in this debate and a new way to a future for all Americans and not only for few. Nothing more and nothing less, I'm afraid. So I hope you will put your discussion in this conference on these issues. And maybe it's interesting for you also, for us in Europe and in Germany, and for also in Dortmund, to find a way to get a discussion about this together in the next months or years maybe. So for that, I wish you a very interesting conference with more new informations and your original topics from the inside of the US for us here in Dortmund. Thank you very much and have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Westphal, and again, thanks to Klaus Wegener. And now it is my great pleasure, a lot of pleasure tonight, but a sincere pleasure, to hand over to my good friend David Patrician, who will moderate tonight's discussion. Now, I know David through a personal connection through Fulbright. We both enjoyed a scholarship at one point. I went to the US, he went to Germany and got stuck here and developed a life here. And he's lived and worked in NRW. He now lives and works in Hamburg as a professional journalist, as a moderator, and among his many, and I have to stress, impressive gigs. I mean, look him up, look up his moderations and also his Korean singing skills. He's done some impressive gigs for NTV and Hamburger Abendblatt, which are very, for the Americans here, very serious and high and top-notch publications in the North. Now, we are glad that David has accepted our invitation for tonight, and now I'll leave it at that. Hand over to David. Again, thanks to everyone involved. I'll switch my video off and wish us all a wonderful discussion. Over to David and over to the former members of Congress. Thanks.
Thank you, Benjamin, and thank you for those very kind words. Yes, good evening. I'm here in Hamburg, in northern Germany. It is my great pleasure and honor to moderate our discussion this evening. To say the least, we have a lot to talk about, many subjects, and to say the least, we are very happy to have won two distinguished guests for our discussion tonight. They both have very long and impressive resumes, and I've tried to kind of summarize them for a brief format. But before I introduce them, I just wanted to go through one or two house rules. As Benjamin said, we have a lot of people signed up tonight, and we're very excited about that. Officially, over 200 people have registered. So we've decided that the best way to do it is that for all of our viewers, if you can turn off your microphone and turn off your camera, and first listen to our discussion. Now, it's very important for me, after we have a few questions and a few discussions with Jim and Melissa, we'll definitely open up the floor for questions. And I can imagine there may be many questions coming at us tonight. So just so that you all know, when the questions are typed in the chat room, try to keep them as short as you can. And as we always say here in Hamburg and also in Germany, we should keep the emotions to the side and try to stick to the actual questions and the policies and the issues that we're trying to talk about and also get answers from. So with that in mind, we very much look forward to our discussion tonight. And first, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce briefly our two distinguished guests, both of them former members of the US Congress. And I'll say already, thank you to both of you for your service to the country. Very well appreciated. We begin with Jim McDermott. Jim is an American politician who was the US representative for the state of Washington, and this is the state, not the city, Washington's 7th Congressional District from 1989 to 2017. He's a member of the Democratic Party. He served on the House Ways and Means Committee and was a member of the House Progressive Caucus. He was formerly the committee chairman, and then in 1995, ranking minority member on the House Ethics Committee. Before entering office, He served in the United States Navy Medical Corps as a psychiatrist in California. In 1988, he was elected to the House of Representatives for Washington's 7th District. The 7th District includes most of Seattle and some of the surrounding suburbs. While in office, Jim was a longtime advocate of a single-payer healthcare system. He voted against the Iraq War. Congressman McDermott was one of the strongest backers of the Affordable Care Act of 2010, commonly known as Obamacare. He's also no stranger to the America House in Nord Rhine-Westfalen. In 2018, he traveled to Cologne, where he delivered the Otto Wolff Lecture on Transatlantic Relations. This was very well received, and we are very happy that he can join us again today. So even though it's virtually, I would ask all of us sitting at home or in office to give a round of applause for Congressman Jim McDermott. Welcome, sir. Our second guest, also we are very happy to have distinguished former Congresswoman Melissa Hart. Melissa Hart is an American lawyer and consultant. She was a Republican member of the United States House of Representatives from 2001 to 2007, representing Western Pennsylvania's 4th Congressional District. She was the first Republican woman to represent Pennsylvania at the federal level, and I have to say, congratulations on that too. Before her time in Congress, Ms. Hart served in the Pennsylvania Senate for 10 years, where she chaired the Finance Committee. In November 2000, Ms. Hart was elected to the House of Representatives from the 4th District of the state of Pennsylvania, encompassing 7 counties in southwestern Pennsylvania. She took office in 2001, and as a freshman was appointed to the Financial Services and Judiciary Committees. She was vice chairman of the Subcommittee on the Constitution. She also was appointed to serve on the House Ways and Means Committee in 2004. Congresswoman Hart authored the Unborn Victims of Violence Law and Violence, Lacey and Connors Law. Additionally, she introduced legislation to assist the cleanup of old industrial sites known as brownfields that were prevalent in her district, and legislation reauthorizing the Metals Initiative to assist growth in the U.S. specialty steel industry. In 2004, Congresswoman Hart co-chaired the Republican Party convention. After leaving office in 2007, she returned to being a lawyer, and recently, together with former House colleague Thaddeus McCotter, has formed the political strategy, creative, and media firm RPC Strategies LLC. Ladies and gentlemen, please give us a virtual applause for Congresswoman Melissa Hart. Welcome. So I spoke to both of them before we began, and in Germany we have the du or Sie, formal, informal. Both of our guests have said I could go with first names, so we'll go with Jim and Melissa. I have a few questions that I'd like to start off with, and I'll start off, Benjamin had mentioned something as a reference to bipartisanship, and I think that's a very good starting point here. It seems that the feeling we have, and I say we, I live now in Germany, although I am an American citizen, is that bipartisanship, especially in the Congress the last few years, has kind of gone its own way on the side. Looking back, there was a very strong tradition of bipartisanship. A few examples here: the 1996 Welfare Reform Act, the 2001 No Child Left Behind Act, and the 2002 the McCain-Feingold Act dealing with campaign donations. It seems that the bipartisanship has really suffered over the past few years. Matter of fact, I looked it up in 2017. John McCain gave his now famous speech during the healthcare vote, saying at the end of the speech, "We've been spinning our wheels on too many important issues because we keep trying to find a way to win without help from across the aisle, So I'd like to start off with Melissa and then go to Jim. What do you think about the current state of bipartisanship in the US Congress? Melissa, please.
I don't know if there is any. It's very disappointing. I know on an individual level, members have always built relationships with each other. Mostly that starts from the fact that each member is probably a neighbor to another member who is not of his or her party. So I'll use an example of from when I served. I represented areas outside of the city of Pittsburgh, and for anybody who's familiar with Western Pennsylvania, it's long been a very heavily Democrat area, and I'm a Republican. So I learned very early in my career that it really wasn't important what the party was as much as focusing on issues that were important that we could cooperate on. And I think bipartisanship really is at its best when members find common problem that they both want to solve and are willing, and that's the key, I think, now, to work together to sort of tease out solutions that they can both support. Right now, I think what we have is leadership in both parties that is more interested in power and really a total control, I think, as was referred to earlier by David, than that, you know, taking a step back, viewing the problem, and really using hearings to actually get information instead of using hearings to, you know, make my case and sort of destroy the other guy's case. Because that's really not, it's really a perversion of the process. And I think what we need are people with the right mindset. And we don't quite have critical mass of them. At least we didn't before the election. Maybe after it, we do.
Okay, thank you very much. Jim, your thoughts? Bipartisanship currently in the U.S. Congress.
Well, Melissa said it, and I believe it doesn't exist at the moment. There are very few issues where you can get the Democrats and the Republicans to compromise. And that's the critical word, compromise. Now, if you have demonized that word and say, if you compromise, well, then you're no longer a Democrat or a Republican, then you can't come together and you get 30% and I get 70% this year, or you get 70% this year and I get 30% this year. Next year, we'll be back the same story, trying to jerk it around and share. You've got to be able to compromise to solve these big issues. And that's why we're not solving climate change. And that's why we haven't done anything with healthcare. And that's why we haven't, in the AIDS or the COVID epidemic, all those issues require real compromise. And that means you're not going to win everything. And if you think you're going to win all the time, or if your goal is to have 100%, then it can't happen. And unfortunately, we've got too many people who are stuck in that rut of thinking, well, maybe if we hang on long enough, we'll get exactly what we want. Well, what happens is you get nothing, which is why we don't have any support right now for our economy. Our economy is going down very fast because the Republicans and the Democrats are not compromising and coming together with something that will provide unemployment insurance and business insurance and all the things that are necessary to sustain the economy in this terrible epidemic.
Thank you. I want to ask you both. I've gone through some quotes from former politicians and congressmen and women the past few years. And one of them that stuck out was Mitch McConnell's quote a few years ago saying that he had hoped, this is on the record, to make President Obama a one-term presidency. Your reaction to that, Jim, and also Melissa?
Well, actually, he made that in 2017. And he tried and tried and tried to undo he did that in 2009.
Wow, correct.
Really was pushing that idea to get rid of Obama, and it didn't work in 2012. And so he came right back in 2013 and he went right on that same. So if your goal is to prevent the leader from ever having success, you're going to undercut an awful lot of the things that are going to require compromise. Lyndon Johnson and Franklin Delano Roosevelt and even Richard Nixon would sit down with the other side and say, all right, how much do you, I'm going to give you this much. Can you accept? No, they need 10% more. And you have to allow that to go on to get anything done. Yep. Melissa, chairman of a finance committee. I was chairman of the Ways and Means Committee for a long time in the legislature. And I know you never get 100% of what you want.
And let me jump in real quick. Thank you very much, Melissa. I wanted to give you an opportunity also to answer on that.
Well, I think the way our legislature is set up, if you don't compromise, you don't accomplish anything, unless you have an extreme majority. And that's obviously, after this last election, something that neither party has. I think, in fact, the results of the last election may adjust some attitudes. I hope it does anyway, on both sides of the aisle, to make people realize that, the public is not in agreement with the extremes of either the Democrats or the Republicans. And really, I think it's been accepted by anyone who's ever spent any time in American politics that the vast majority of Americans are in the middle, whether they're a little bit right of center or a little bit left of center. They're not on the hard left or the hard right. And so to try to govern from one of those ends is just really not very practical. But Mitch McConnell's statement is just the statement of a floor leader. You could find a similar statement, I'm sure, from Speaker Pelosi after Trump was elected. That's just firing up their troops. I don't see that as a policy statement or anything like that. Mitch McConnell's a practical guy, and he does what he needs to do to get it done. In fact, I think with a lot of the people in those positions who've been there for a long time, like he has, you could probably find a quote to say pretty much anything you want him to say, unfortunately.
Okay, let me continue. Thank you both for those answers. Doing some research here in Germany, many Germans I speak to also, they're very, very surprised about the length and the amount of money that are spent on American campaigns. Some figures that I saw for 2016 were that it combined for both candidates and both parties, over $6.5 billion were spent for the 2016 election campaign. Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing? I'll ask both of you this. I'll start with Melissa. To have these almost, it seems like, never-ending campaigns, almost 2 years, and on the same side, has it become more of a distraction? I know the media loves it because we're covering it, we're trying to get the ratings, but as far as governing, do you think it's a good thing to have these very, very long election campagns? Melissa, I'll let you begin.
Sure, don't get me started on the media, but you will at some point, and I'll tell you what I think about it. But well, first of all, I'm a recent consultant. I did not work on campaigns in this election cycle, so I just wanted to clear that out there right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I didn't make any money off this election cycle. The issue of spending in campaigns has always been one that is hotly contested, and I think people's positions have changed over the years. I remember when Jim and I were both serving and we did the last reform, we were trying to allow the candidates to have more control and to make sure that there was more, basically, disclosure about the money that was spent. We failed. The bill wasn't enough. It did not disclose enough truth to the public. I've always been an advocate of the candidates being able to control their message, and that means that the candidates are the ones who spend money in the race. What we've had more recently is the candidates actually losing control of their messages and of basically what the debate is during a race. And I find that to be one of the most abhorrent parts of politics that we have in the United States. We do have to have disclosure about, where the money comes from. So there's all these organizations that have lovely, warm, fuzzy names like Americans Who Love Children and Americans Who Love Grandparents, but they're all, dark money organizations, and they all pay for those messages, many of which are pretty vile. And I think for us, we do need to take a look back at how campaigns are funded. I don't have a problem with them being funded by the private sector, but I do have a problem when we don't know who the people are behind the messages.
Super. Thank you very much. Jim, I'll ask you the same question. 2016, over $6.5 billion invested into the campaign. Is it healthy for the United States to have these almost 2-year-long presidential election campaigns? And is it turning out to be sometimes a distraction from getting the job done?
It's a distraction, it's wrong, and it really is destroying the system. We had a court case a number of years ago called Citizens United, in which a decision was made by the court that money equals free speech, which meant people could spend as much of their own money in political campaigns, and you couldn't stop them because it was free speech, because we have the First Amendment. And that opened the doors to everybody putting in more and more money, so that now I won my first congressional campaign in 1989 for about $30,000. That race today would be $3 million.
Wow.
And the congressperson who's going to win that, or sitting in Congress today, is spending half their time either in the Republican offices or the Democratic offices of the campaign committee, making telephone calls, begging for money.
Can I ask you that? We've heard some reports about that. Are we saying on average per week, 3-4 hours per month? Can you get some?
Yes. No, we're taking per week. Half your time is spent in the fundraising. I mean, I had a district where I was solidly Democratic, so I didn't have to do that. But anybody who's in a swing district, like the one that Melissa was in, you have to raise a pile of money, because people say money equals your viability. If you don't have money, it means you're not going to win.
Right.
Wow.
That's how you're judged, all by how much money you can raise. And when that's what's going on, the people get lost. I mean, they don't know what's going on. They don't know where Melissa and I are spending our time. And we're not spending our time on the issues. We're spending our time on raising money.
Yeah. Melissa, you would also agree? In your district, you spend almost half your time fundraising?
Yeah, to a degree. You know, it's funny. People ask me about campaigning, and they say, you know, should congressmen have to run every 2 years? And I would tell them a couple of things. One is, I don't mind the running every 2 years. I didn't mind it. I thought it was helpful because it does force the member into the communities that he or she represents and out of Washington, D.C. I think that's the whole reason why we go to Washington, D.C. is so that we can represent the folks back home. So if we're not at home, we don't know what's really happening on the ground. So that's the on the ground, feet on the ground issue. Okay, but the issue Jim's talking about is in order to get the message out during your campaign cycle, you do have to raise significant amounts of money to buy the television, to buy the social media, to buy everything you need to buy in order to convince people that you need to be sent back there to represent them. So I agree with him mostly. I do, like I said, I don't have a problem with the people raising money because there's some indication that you have support. The question is, from where can you raise money? And I think there's a valid discussion to be had. Should there be amounts, limits? We had that discussion when I was there, and I wasn't supportive of them. But as the campaign spending has kind of gotten out of hand again, like I don't like the idea of just anybody being able to spend money on race.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Let me jump to our next subject. We're dealing with the coronavirus. Of course, it's an international, global issue. And of course, to you all and everyone of our viewers, we hope that everyone is safe and doing well. That's the most important thing. But with the coronavirus in the United States, we have now, as of this morning, over 11 million Americans that are infected, and tragically over 250,000 Americans who have died from the coronavirus. When we watched the election campaigns and the rallies, we saw two different issues. On the one side, President Trump and his team said that it could have been much, much worse, and that they had really stopped millions of people dying at this point. On the other side, people were saying that this was just lack of leadership. There was no unified federal approach, and that it was a tragedy that 220,000 people had died, and it just was a symbolism for the lack of management. So I'll start off with Jim real quick. I can tell you that here in Germany, people are watching in the United States. There is concern. There's certainly a disappointment as far as in the past, the U.S. is seen as a leader in fighting these kinds of pandemics and problems. And now it seems like America has been caught as the victim. So I wanted to ask you briefly about the coronavirus and how the United States is handling it. And on the side, in addition, if the articles I read are correct and when I speak to the journalists back in the United States, wearing a face mask has also become a political issue for many people, as far as saying that a face mask, if you wear it, you're one political party, and if you don't, you're another. So your thoughts on that. Jim, I'll start with you.
Well, my view is that President Trump was defeated because he failed to deal with the epidemic. His attitude that it's just kind of the flu or it's another problem this year. Don't worry about it. You gotta man up and go on out there and be in it. And he allowed it to get totally out of control. All you have to do is look at Korea or Japan or a lot of places where the government stepped in and stopped it. And they did the same. I'm in France right now. And Macron said to everybody on the 15th of March, you are going to stay in your house. He shut the country down. But Trump says, no, do whatever you want. And I'll let the 50 governors do whatever they want. And so you have no plan in the United States whatsoever. So Sturgis, South Dakota has a motorcycle picnic with 300,000 people coming from all over the country and not social distancing and not wearing face masks. And then they go home and spread it all over the place. That you don't have football games. I mean, we're in Dortmund. Borussia Dortmund plays in the stadium. There's not a soul in that stadium except the soccer players. And that's true. And we have had to, we've got to do that. But that comes from the top. If the top doesn't say that's what they're going to do, then we're in chaos. And that's where we are. We're in chaos.
Okay. Thank you for your thoughts on that, Jim. Melissa, I want to give you a chance also. The current administration's handling of the coronavirus, some of your thoughts on that and the current situation?
Yeah, I think the nature of the United States and the people in the United States is a little different than the people of Japan and South Korea to begin with. We've not dealt with wearing masks as they have in Asia in the fairly recent past when they had their prior SARS issue. It was about a decade ago. So people in the United States, it was a very foreign issue. I mean, the last pandemic we dealt with was, I know, the swine flu, but it wasn't like it was in 1919 or whatever.
Yeah, 1918.
We're not, we're not oriented that way. So do I think that, I guess is the question, do I think that the administration should have, told the country what to do? I think that they probably could have had a more clear and unified message, yes. When they first started out and they had a task force that was very clear about what was happening, what the knowledge they were gaining, sharing that knowledge, I thought that was great. And it was very helpful to a lot of people to understand what it was. From there, though, I mean, it's a big country, and having the governors basically be handling different rules for different states, I thought was appropriate because there were a number of areas that really hadn't been affected by the virus at all. And travel was cut. Many employers voluntarily closed their doors. There's a lot more done voluntarily here than I think people in other countries are used to. They're used to getting those kinds of directives. That's just not something that we do here to much of an extent. I think the problems really occurred, and I'm going to say this because all the political people made it political. It became, let's criticize everything. Let's find every error that was made and let's turn it into a vicious, intentional mistake. It just seemed like the parties were at each other's throats, and I give the Democrats zero props for being helpful at all during the time that the president and the administration were trying to figure out what this is and what to do about it. So I think the country failed together. I think the governors continue to fail together. I'm embarrassed by the lack of leadership in states like New York, where now they're all blaming the president for this issue, where it's a virus that entered the country. And unfortunately for us, we didn't know enough about it and, didn't handle it probably as well as it could have been handled.
Yeah.
No doubt about that.
Let me jump in, and thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. I see we have a couple of questions from our audience, but I'd like to ask one more before we start our first round of questions. And that was, Melissa, you and I in some of the emails, we talked a little bit about the influence of social media on politics, and you had also definitely wanted to mention something about, in your opinion, the corrosive influence of social media on politics. Jim, I'm going to ask you that as well. No question about it, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, social media has played a big, big role since the last couple of years, but certainly in 2020 elections. I wanted to give you a chance to share some of your views on that, Melissa.
Yeah, I've never in my life seen such bad behavior. Here's the thing. If you have to deal with a person face to face, not you in particular, many would never behave the way that they do on, especially Twitter. Just the fact that the president used Twitter, not helpful. Can
I jump in there? I got to jump in because in Germany, it really, they shake their heads that the president of the United States can Twitter sometimes 20 times in the middle of the night with no filters. Is that an issue for you?
Yeah, it is. I think that there's a decorum that the office should have. And I have a lot of friends who didn't like the president and didn't support the president and didn't vote for the president, even though they loved the policies that he advanced, because no other Republican had the gumption to move forward with a lot of the great policies that the Trump administration did. But they couldn't vote for him because they thought he totally lacked what they would like to see in a president, which is the decorum and the willingness to have some filter, some control, some respect for what I think people would think is a presidential demeanor, what people are used to. So yeah, as an aside, but I think social media, not just the president, it's different organizations, it's different politicians, it's gotcha, it's just some of the worst behavior I've ever seen. I got on Twitter actually a couple of years ago because I'm a hockey fan and I wanted to follow different teams and get updates on trades and things like that. And then when I realized, as a politician or a former politician, somebody's interested in politics, I should start following these different things. And quickly unfollowed many of them because they're just corrosive is the word. And I'm embarrassed by it and the behavior of a lot of my fellow Americans.
Okay, thank you very much, Tim. I wanted to give you a chance also to reply on that. Social media and the effects of 2020 certainly wasn't the case when you first won back in the 1980s. And there's been a lot of change the last 10 years or so.
I'm from Seattle, where we are at the center of all of this stuff. We have as much social media in Seattle as any place in the country. And I recognized that I didn't understand how to use it. I think the people who are 20 years younger than me or 30 years younger than me are able to use it and manipulate people. And it's a very manipulatable medium to change people's minds without them even being aware of it. I mean, I can see in my dealings with Amazon and when I get messages from them about, wouldn't I like to buy this? Wouldn't I like to? How did you know I was interested in that? I mean, that kind of social media stuff is being used now in ways that I think most Americans my age or under the age of 50 do not really understand. And the young kids understand it. And it is, as Melissa says, people are saying things on social media they would never say to someone's face. You just wouldn't do that.
There certainly is a technical divide in addition to some of the other divisions that we have in the United States.
Yeah, it gives you a real distance from the person you're slamming. And that's really very, very disastrous. You ought to stand and look at them.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt. It's also the limited space, right? You have a couple of paragraphs on Facebook, or you have 100 and some words on Twitter, and there's no substance. There's just a lot of garbage, and I don't know. I find it's dumbed down people. I think in a way where there's a lack of critical thinking. There's a lack of just being quiet and thinking things through, and just all the things that actually you make better decisions. They are not aided by social media.
Yeah, I agree. And I'd like to make one recommendation. I don't do it often, but recently I saw the documentary film, The Social Dilemma, and that really does a great. Yeah, thank you.
This movie.
It does a really good job of actually some people that work for these companies that left the companies and said that we're really destroying the base of truth, and they're very concerned about it. So that's one with a good conscience I can recommend, The Social Dilemma. Good, let me go.
I saw the movie, and I think it says it so that a person like me can understand it. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on any of that stuff because I don't need it, and I'm unwilling to let them into my life that way.
So you must have a lot of extra time without all those distractions, Jim.
And somehow you're happy and well informed.
I have the New York Times. And I'm in rural France, so I only have the New York Times and CNN. And then I can go out and use them, Google and whatever, and find out things if I want to know. But the constant time that people spend on their...
Yeah, it's addictive. Let me jump in here. I have already, and thank you very much, Katerina. We have some of our questions coming to me. This question is basically for both of you, so anyone can jump in. The first question here, it's from Edward. Surely the Democrats and the Republicans can compromise on general investment in capital projects, such as railways, roads, schools, hospitals, etc. It seems pretty basic. What do you all have to say? Maybe I'll start with Jim. Is that something on those basic infrastructure projects that should be easy to compromise, or is that also something that can get stuck in the halls of Congress?
Well, it probably is the area where there should be the least conflict, because you need roads in Washington State and you need them in Pennsylvania. So Melissa and I both have an interest in what goes into that bill. And internet goes all over the country. I mean, when Eisenhower put in the road system in the country, he didn't put it in one place or keep it away from states politically or anything else. He put it everywhere. And that's the problem, is that the people who are writing the bills get fighting about how much they're going to give to the other side because they'll look too good. We're not going to give you a lot of money in New York State because you voted against, or you with California or whatever. And when that's what happens, you don't get the bill through. And so we have lots of people out there who could be making money doing things we need to do, but instead our bridges are falling down and our roads are in problems. And now we've got the school kids don't have the internet to use to do online learning because it's not all over the country. It's not everywhere.
Let me jump in. Melissa, how about your reply on that one? Basic projects, infrastructure, airports, roads, seems to be very complicated to even unify some of those issues.
Well, and I'm not there now to know how hard it's been for them to pass their appropriations bills, but it seems like every year they become more and more politicized, and they end up with we'd call an omnibus bill, where they throw a number of things together into one bill, which is never a good move. So I would say that there ought to be, again, the type of human that runs for office has changed, it seems, and we need more people who actually are there to do service, not self-service, public service, not self-service. And, you know, that's really up to the voters. I do think that there's an increase, a major increase, and I'm sure Jim would agree with me, in the way the public is just ready to completely tear apart public officials who are trying to do their job. And I can tell you that that certainly puts a chilling effect on the good person who'd like to do public service. So I think, you know, as a country, we can all point at Washington and say, "Ooh, they're awful people," but we sent them there. And I think everyone really needs to take a look inward and say, okay, what kind of person should really serve in government? Should it be a person who wants to be famous and get on TV? Or should it be someone who maybe has shown in their prior life before they ran that they really are interested in doing community service of some kind? Or there's something in their background that shows that they're really interested in solving problems or good at it, and that they're able to work with people who aren't the same as they are. I think that's very important as well. So, you know, this is an indictment of all of us, really, that we need to look inwardly and think about, okay, what don't we like about our government? And so why is it like that now, as opposed to maybe the way it might have been in, you know, 1985 or 1990.
Okay, super. Thank you very much.
Melissa raises raises an issue that really needs to be explored a little bit further. There are two kinds of people who go to Congress. There are those who want to do something and those who want to be somebody. And we had a senator who used to call them workhorses and show horses. Yes. And the more show horses you have, the less gets done, because the workhorses are there. If I say to anybody who's going to run for Congress, tell me why you're running, because what is it you want to do? Yeah. And that ought to be the first question you ask anybody. What are you going there to do?
Yep. Back to the basics. Very good. Let me continue. We have another question from our audience. This one is specifically directed at Melissa. I'll go ahead and read it. Melissa, what is the expectation from Melissa, to the current tactics from Mitch McConnell and the GOP to not concede the presidential election? Will this be gone in January after the Senate runoffs in Georgia, or is it deeper, sticking with Donald Trump, that will be seen all along the next 4 years? And Jim, you can add something too if you want, but I'd like to start this one off to Melissa. It's directed to her.
We have a process that was actually drawn up by our Constitution. So right now we're in a period of time where the states haven't even certified the voting. So I think it's important for a lot of people to understand this happened in 2000, the year I got elected to Congress. I didn't know who the president was going to be that I would serve with, even though I had won my election. And that is because there were some very closely contested states. We have that issue now. So, get past the Trump bluster and whatever you're obsessed with, because that's not really what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with, there's bluster, but that's not what the substance is. The substance is that the states need to get through the concerns about the closeness of their races, like Georgia's going to have a recount, for example. So we can't certify, individual states must certify their elections. And from there, we have a process that each state sends what they call electors. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Electoral College, but that was also set up by our Constitution. And they will send a certain number of people based on how many members of Congress they have to vote. And that's how, if you've seen the tallies, that there needs to be, 272 Electoral College votes for a person to be named President of the United States. That's when that will happen. So it's not until the states certify their elections, then appoint their electors. Those electors will then go vote basically what the state voted, and then we'll have a president. And that's not until December, I think, 14th.
14th. Melissa, I'd like to jump in because your facts are correct and they're very matter of fact, but you said before, put aside President Trump's bluster. But I find that a little bit difficult when you have the president who is, as we mentioned, nonstop tweeting, nonstop saying that if a question is against him, and I say this as a journalist, I guess, no matter what the news organization, if it's critical, it's a bad question or a bad journalist. I think for a lot of people, even normal citizens, it's tough to get past that bluster. And so what can we do against that? Let's put it that way, because you say it very matter-of-factly, but I think when we're looking at what Donald Trump has done and the way he expresses himself, that's very difficult to do.
It shouldn't be. I wasn't a supporter of Donald Trump in the Republican primary, but once he won the Republican primary and I looked at his agenda, I was comfortable with his agenda as president of the United States. He did a lot of really good things, and for some reason people seem to just think that he's just this terrible, horrible human being, and he might be. I don't know him, but the point isn't that. I mean, there have been other presidents that I don't care for, but you looked at his agenda. Now he's a candidate who may have just lost an election. So, let that settle in. If you've ever been a candidate who lost an election, all right? Ignore that. Let that process go, because it has nothing to do with the electoral or what the states are doing counting. Now, the lawsuits and those kinds of things are in order to pursue what each state has required in their elections. Again, those will be settled by the courts, and many already have been. So it just moves forward slowly. This need for instant gratification and instant answers does not mesh with the way the system works in the United States, where we have electors who then go and then finalize who won the presidency.
Valid point. Can I jump in, Melissa? I want to ask Jim something, because in one of the comment boxes, there was a mention that it seemed that President Trump received an unfair amount of criticism from the very beginning, when he was a candidate to the first few days in office. Would you agree with that assessment, that the criticism, especially at the very beginning, before it even started, the first 100 days, was a little bit stronger for him than for other previous presidents? Of course, it's a very, very subjective question.
It's a long time ago, 4 years ago. I would say what is the real problem right now is that the Republicans are using the arguments that Melissa is using, that we can't do anything until the electors do all this stuff. So they are not starting the transition. Now, the problem with that is you have a vaccine that's got to be distributed to 330 million people. And that's going to take a lot of planning, and they should be planning now to do that. But they're saying to Mr. Biden, sit down and wait. And when we have this elections, then we'll let you plan. So he will become president in January and have lost 3 months of planning the distribution of vaccine to the country. Then everybody will say, geez, why didn't they get this stuff out here quicker? And it will all be blamed on him, when in fact that transition should be going on right now. If Mr. Trump wins the election by the Electoral College, that'll all have been wasted. I understand that. But if he doesn't win and Joe does, the Americans are the beneficiary. Mm-hmm. And if you look back on the 9/11 Commission, when they did the study on 9/11, they said that the prolongation of the election stopped the transition for the Bush administration so that they weren't prepared in September when 9/11 happened. It had a direct long-term effect on the United States of America. And that's why it's important that the transition start. I mean, let them go to court, let them fight about whatever they want. We'll see how it comes out, but let both sides be ready to start on the 20th of January.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. We have
I don't have that same concern, can I say?
Please go ahead.
The president doesn't go in and change everything about how, for example, the president had said something about the military distributing the vaccine, and they're putting all these things into place. I don't believe that going from Trump to Biden, if that's what happens, is going to prevent us from getting the vaccine. We have all those people in place that are going to stay there. The bureaucracy is the bureaucracy. There's a lot of people ready to go, and it's not like the president isn't being president now. They're getting them ready to go. I mean, we already have had, 2 vaccines that have been over 90% effective that have come out. It's not like the president's just sitting on his hands.
Going to take a moment now. Unfortunately, I've got to jump in.
The current government is in office. This current government is continuing to govern until there's a change in January 20th or not. Okay. So, I think that there's a little bit of drama going on here.
Yeah, that certainly is the case. I've got a question for the both of you. I'm going to start with Melissa, also from our audience. What do Jim and Melissa expect to happen? Will Mr. Trump finally accept the election and the change in presidency? Will it be performed peacefully? Just real quick.
Yeah, this goes back to our media and all the just explosiveness of this accusations that Trump is not going to leave and all this kind of stuff. When the electors make the decision, if Trump loses, Trump will leave. That's it. Just like any other president who loses.
I'm going to jump in and ask
you both. Member of Congress or member of the Senate
your sources for the media. Where do you get a majority of your news? Melissa and Jim? Melissa?
Oh gosh, I must probably read 20 different things every day.
So a variety of sources, 20 different sources.
Yeah, I don't trust any of them, but I read them.
No one knows what Mr. Trump is going to do because he doesn't know. He's acting like a 3-year-old child who makes decisions every minute. He goes one way, and then 5 minutes later he's back and he's retweeting going the other way. And you don't know where.
I respect your opinion, but I want to keep it objective. Jim, where do you keep? Where do you get your news sources from?
I told you the Times, the New York Times, and the CNN and BBC and the French television. I see what's going on. Plus, I have my computer, which I have access to The Economist and to the Washington Post, and I've got everything in my computer. So I have everything. If I was in Seattle right now in confinement, I would have the same things there. I wouldn't have any more.
It's a good point here. I want to jump in. Melissa, if I can ask you, especially when I speak to some of my Republican friends in the United States, this distrust for mainstream media, I think it's a very valid point we have to discuss about. So when we're talking about things like the New York Times, ABC News, NBC News, we'll leave away the cable for right now. Would you say that the majority of Republicans that you've dealt with or represented don't believe mainstream media today in the United States?
Well, this all stems from the really wholesale acceptance of what happened when President Trump took office, what happened actually even before while he was a candidate, and how it was reported. You know, we saw one alleged, scandal after another by the Democrats, which the media sold as if it were fact, and then it's all been slowly peeled away and debunked. So, we're talking Russia and all that kind of stuff. I mean, the impeachment was just outrageous. Some of this stuff is just crazy, and it was given legitimacy. It was really an effort, again, like Mitch McConnell said, he didn't want Barack Obama to have more than one term. Well, it's very clear from the actions of the Congress after Trump got elected that they weren't going to allow him to accomplish anything. So it's even worse in that they logged, all kinds of accusations at the guy that were unfounded ultimately. So
okay. So would
that's
you
a problem.
Based on that, many Republicans do not believe mainstream media in the United States today, based on what you just said.
Absolutely. The media was not critical whatsoever of anything that was done by any Democrat leader or impeachment leader. Adam and I were colleagues and freshmen together. I never thought of him as someone who I would trust to begin with, and then he became the impeachment leader. I mean, not real good. No, the media was not critical at all of one side and constantly critical of the other.
Let me jump in. Thank you both for sharing.
It's obvious. It's been shown.
Yep. Thank you both for sharing your opinions on that. I think it's very valid, and it also gives us a very good understanding of the divide that we have in the United States. Let's be very clear about it. Right now, as far as the official counts go, Joe Biden in the popular vote has 77, a little bit plus minus million votes. Donald Trump, 71 million votes. So extremely very close on the popular vote. And I think these divisions also are highlighted by what Melissa and Jim are sharing with us. I can always say thank you for that. It's a big help to us.
But I'm the only one in the United States.
Yeah. Okay. Enjoy a good taco for me. They're tough to get out here in Germany.
No, we can get them, no problem.
Let me ask, we have another question coming in from Nora. This is going out to both of you, so I'll start with Jim. What do you both expect of Kamala Harris to help Joe Biden? Now, he put sarcastically, old man Joe Biden, no secret. When he becomes president in January, he will be the oldest United States president with the age of 78. Is she able to bring people together from both parties? Jim, Kamala Harris, what do you think about her?
Well, I think that the presidency is a person killer. It is more than a job for one person. And what happened with Barack Obama was he used his vice president for a variety of things and put him in lots of places where he had new stuff and could do stuff, and was really a right arm or a left arm, depending on how you want to look at it. And I think that that's what Kamala Harris is going to be for Joe Biden. She's going to be out there doing things in places where he would like to have somebody, but he can't be in two places at one time. And so he's going to have to send her out to do some things. And you look at the world in terms of the epidemic and the environment and the whole question of our foreign relations, our foreign policy. Joe Biden can't do it all by himself. So he's got to have an assistant who actually helps him. It used to be that the vice president was nothing but as one former Speaker of the House said, a warm bucket of spit. But it isn't anymore. It is a very important adjunct to the president, and I think she'll do a good job.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Would you like to add something to that as far as Kamala Harris and what she could bring to a Joe Biden presidency?
Sure. I think it's interesting. Now, I live in an area that is still predominantly registered Democrat, but became very supportive of President Trump. And so those Democrats, a lot of whom went home and supported Joe Biden because they remember a moderate Joe Biden. And he always presented himself as more of a middle of the road guy on policy. He chose, if I'm not mistaken, the one U.S. senator with the most, what they would consider liberal voting record and liberal bona fides, or progressive even bona fides in the Senate. So
Forgotten Elizabeth Warren.
Oh, well, okay. I'll take that under advisement. I know she is on financial issues, that's for sure. But so anyways, Senator Harris, for want of a more clear title at this point, is not someone that's going to help engender support among those who didn't vote for Joe Biden. I don't think she's going to be much help at all. I'm very, very, very concerned about the health of Joe Biden and that he be protected and maintained during that presidency if he is determined to be the victor, because I am not comfortable in any way under the leadership of Kamala Harris.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you both for sharing your thoughts on that. We have time for one or two more questions. We're coming towards the end of our discussion, fantastic discussion. To our audience, if you still would like to ask a question, feel free to send that in. I would like to ask a question to you all. I know you are former congressmen and congresswomen, but the transatlantic relationship, of course, here in Germany is extremely important. And one of the decisions that President Trump made a few months ago was saying that he'd like to reduce the troops, the American troops, from 36,000 troops to 24,000 troops, so bringing or restationing 12,000 American soldiers. It came very quickly. Some say it was almost as a slight because Chancellor Merkel decided not to come to Washington in June out of coronavirus fears, and within a few days afterwards, that decision was made public. So my question to both of you, the transatlantic relationship, even though you're not actively in Congress, do you feel it's good? Because on this side of the Atlantic, I know that Germany wants to have a very strong relationship, but how is the mood in the United States and also in the United States Congress from what you're seeing? I'll start off with Jim and then go to Melissa. Jim, please.
Well, I got a call from one of my friends who's a politician in Ireland. And he said, what do you think is going to happen with respect to Europe and the new president? And I said, well, the thought is that he's going to make his first trip to Dublin. And when he does, you should have every leader of every country in Europe in Dublin so the president can tell him the same thing, which is, we're back. We're not withdrawing from NATO. We're not withdrawing from Europe or our commitments to Europe. I was over there some years ago when the Poles were very worried about whether the Russians were going to move into Poland, because they were moving into the Ukraine, and they said, what will Americans do? The Europeans want to hear from the president that he's committed to a unified protection of the Western world, and he will do that. This going alone for America, isolationism, will not work. It didn't work before the Second World War. It didn't work before the First World War. We got ourselves into trouble when we started trying to be isolated and sit over here and ignore what's going on in Europe. And Joe knows that, and he'll be over there very quickly.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Melissa, wanted to give you a chance. The transatlantic relationship from your observations now.
Yeah, I think that actually, David, as you expressed, is too many people probably are worried about Mr. Trump's personality. You know, there's a lot of change from the decorum of prior presidents, and I know that makes people uncomfortable. I don't think that the people of the United States, though, have any less of a desire for a good relationship with Europe. They want to keep the NATO ties strong, and I don't see that that relationship would be in danger from the United States point of view. I would think that if Mr. Biden does become the president, that there'll be more focus on it. Certainly, I think Mr. Trump's goals were to make sure that the United States was exerting itself in relationships that he believed, and many Americans believe, certainly I did while I was a member of Congress, a lot of my colleagues did, that the United States was being taken advantage of in a lot of ways, and that more resources were being asked of the United States than other countries were willing to expend themselves in a lot of our relationships. So I think writing those to a degree that more Americans believe that they were fair, or at least two-way relationships instead of one way in the United States, give, 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 and everyone else's take, 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 are better now. So I think that that will help also in that relationship.
Okay. I wanted to ask you a question specifically to you, Melissa. Now, after 4 years with Donald Trump, Republican president, what do you think the effects will be now for the Republican Party? Is the Republican Party very strong? Many people say that already here they're speculating that he may run again in 2024 because of his 70 million votes. He seems to be the front runner. He certainly gets the media attention and the most clicks on stories. What is the legacy here with Donald Trump and the effects for the Republican Party?
Yeah, I mean, if he is not reelected, I think that he's going to have to make a choice. To be honest, I think there are a lot of people who'd be willing to keep him as the, head of the party, because obviously he was the president of the United States. It's pretty hard to deny that he would be the head of the party. But again, there's a lot of Republicans who would like to move on. So the question is there someone or a group of people in the Republican Party who are going to be able to demonstrate the kind of leadership that would win over more people, considering that vote, and keeping in mind that there were a lot of Democrats in that number as well. A lot of Republicans voted for Biden, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the party next. And I've had a number of discussions with my fellow party members in my state about what happens here as well as a result of this election, whatever way it goes. So I think that's really all the pieces are up in the air right now to see what will happen. But I expect that Trump does have the inside track if he wishes to remain sort of the standard bearer for the party. But again, there's a lot of people who don't want that. So it's going to be an interesting struggle, I think, within the party to see what happens next.
Okay, thank you very much. Jim, I had a question for you. You were in the Congress for many, many years. Did you notice a change in working and dealing with the Republican Party when you started as compared to the last couple of years when you were in office?
There was a sea change when Newt Gingrich took over the House. The Democratic Party had controlled the Congress for almost 50 years. And when he came in and changed it, he changed and broke a lot of the relationships and changed the rules and did a lot of changes. And at that point, there did begin to be a whole different relationship in how we dealt with each other. It wasn't just Newt. I mean, it was a whole process of what was going on. But that made much more difficult, and it's only gotten worse since Newt, because it has gotten more and more about power. Melissa said it almost the first thing she said was, the problem right now in Washington is about who's got the power. They don't care about whether they do anything. They care about having the power. And that's the only thing. And I left in 2017, not because I couldn't have won again. I had a district I could have won till I died in it. But I was 80 years old, and Jay Rockefeller and I were sitting there one day, and he said to me, you know, Jim, when I worked in corporations where at 70, they throw you off the board. Here you are and we're still running the world. He said, it's time for us to get out of here. So that I always could find a way to get something done, but you can't. Today, it's very hard coming in as Melissa did for 6 years. It's so hard to find anybody on the other side that wants to talk to you.
Yeah, understood. Thank you for sharing that. We do have 2 or 3 questions, but we're running out of time, so I apologize for that. But I would like to leave it with 2 things. One, again, we both, Jim and Melissa, were in contact before this evening's event, and I appreciate the insight. Melissa, you had mentioned about, to touch on the religious freedom in the United States. And as we know, religion certainly plays a big role in American politics, whether it's the evangelical votes going for a party, whether it's issues such as abortion and pro-choice, pro-life. So I wanted to give you a chance to discuss about that, religion and politics, and Jim, you as well.
Yeah, I think actually the issues you cited are sort of yesterday's religious issues. Today's religious issues seem to be more oriented toward the freedom to worship. You know, I'm a Roman Catholic, and I am very concerned that lockdowns and a number of the issues that have been dealt with by different states have, it seems anyway, intentionally by some governors targeted churchgoers. Versus those.
I'm sorry, Melissa, your connection, at least on my side, I cannot hear you again. Let's try it maybe, or turn your microphone on and off one time. We couldn't hear you at the last sentence.
Okay.
Now you're back. Thank you. I'm sorry, continue.
All right, thanks. It seemed like some of the lockdowns and the prohibitions on gatherings targeted churches. And I'm finding that to be abhorrent as far as this country goes, and as our Constitution goes. Obviously, number one, freedom of speech and religion, freedom of assembly. Now, I understand that it's important for us to be careful during a pandemic, but when casinos in Nevada are allowed to be open and people are allowed to protest in close quarters in the streets, for example, that closing churches, which was mandated in some states, was just over the top. So I think that's number one, is people of faith are not respected in this country the way they used to be. And considering that the founders of this country actually came here largely to have religious freedom, that's pretty ironic. So a lot of us are focused on those issues. Plus, those who don't agree with gay marriage, those who don't agree with other issues, now with this really aggressive culture that we have with the LGBTQ community, telling people who may disagree with them that they're bigots and they're discriminated against in the workplace, that sort of thing. And it's inappropriate. If it's inappropriate to discriminate against someone because of their gender, then it's inappropriate also to discriminate against them because of their faith.
Okay. Let me jump. Thank you very much, Melissa. Last word on that, Jim, as far as the role of religion and American politics. Is it like peanut butter and jelly? The two will always be together?
I happen to be a believer in separation of church and state, totally. And so I don't think the government should be involved in anything related to religion. We shouldn't be deciding. And we say a pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America under one God. Well, wait a minute. Are we talking about Yahweh?
It's just under God, Jim.
Are we talking about Muslim God? Are we talking about the Hindu God? Or we've got all kinds of people on the floor of the House now, and we make everybody stand up there and say, under God. And what does it mean? I mean, it means nothing. God isn't in the process. A democracy is a government of human beings making decisions about the way they're going to live. And it shouldn't come in as to, I don't care whether she's Catholic or Polish or she's whatever she is. She can be anything. As long as she's been elected, she has one vote just like me. And that's how it ought to be, in my view of the process.
Right.
Thank you very much.
I'm certainly willing, if people want to go to church and get COVID-19, it's okay with me. I don't care. That's their choice. Let them go.
Thank
We
you.
agree on these. Yep.
Appreciate it. So the final question I have, I know, Melissa, you've said we still have to wait until all the votes are counted for, fair enough, but going into the assumption that Joe Biden does become president, and January 20th, Kamala Harris the vice president, what do you both think, this is the final question of the evening, what do you both think is an issue that would be pretty easy for both Republicans and Democrats to agree on in the Congress? Is there one thing where you'd say, based on your experiences, well, we'd have a good chance, whether it be supporting the troops or, you know, less taxes, something where you think that both parties at this stage, 2020, have a good chance of agreement and under a new administration, after all the votes, of course, have been counted and validated. Jim, I'm going to start with you and let Melissa have the final word on that. Jim, please.
I'd be glad to let her go first. It's hard to see anything that's going to be easy to do.
I would have to agree.
We ought to be able to come together in the sense of the common good for the health of the country. You ought to be able to put on a mask, and I ought to be able to put on a mask, and I ought to be able to socially distance, and you ought to be able to, and we ought to, and you shouldn't go out on Christmas and have all your, we ought to be able to agree on some things like that, because that has to do with life and death. A lot of this other stuff is money and, you know, I mean, roads and highways and schools and space and foreign relations and all that. But the health of the American people, every mother in this country that is sending her kid to school is worried about her child going to school. Are they going to get COVID? Are they going to bring COVID home to grandpa or bring it home to mama or bring it home? And everybody in the country is worried. That's why there's so much tension right now, because everybody's worried about it. We ought to be able to agree on that, I believe.
Thank you, Jim. Melissa, the final word, something that you think, if we have a new administration now, January 20th, that the Republicans and Democrats in the current Congress could maybe come together for an issue. What would that be?
So I'm going to assume that Georgia goes Republican, and we have a Senate that's majority Republican. And the markets will do very well then, because apparently they like divided government. So we would have a President Joe Biden, Democrat, with dealing with Mitch McConnell and the Republicans. So what do I think those two can agree on? And I think the answer is probably going to be some kind of spending bill. I think that we'll find that there'll be something to supercharge the economy so that people who've lost work because of the pandemic can help their families and start to work again and grow the economy. I think it'll be something along that line.
Okay, super, thank you.
Something not that exciting, but something very, very important to the
Sometimes politics don't have to be that exciting, believe me.
Right. And that's what we needed them to focus on, the needs of the people of the United States.
Fair enough. Thank you both very much. I wanted to take now a moment to thank both of you. On behalf of Benjamin Becker and the entire America House North Rhine-Westphalen team, and also their partners, the cities of Düsseldorf and Dortmund, and the European Directors Centers of Düsseldorf and Dortmund, and also the Auslandsgesellschaft E.V. EV. We want to say thank you to Congresswoman Melissa Hart and Congressman James McDermott. Thank you for spending this time and sharing your insights. What a really fantastic opportunity it is to speak with two lawmakers that were in the Congress for many years and were part of this active process. Even though we're in front of our computers, I would still say if we could give ourselves all a digital round of applause. And I can only say thank you all very much for participating. Also to our audience, thank you for staying with us until the very end of this fascinating discussion. As far as I know, no one else would like to do a closing statement. I'll just ask one more time, Klaus and Benjamin, are we okay to send everyone off dem Heimweg to their homes, even though it might just be living around the corner? Then I would just say thank you all very much for a fantastic discussion. The next few weeks will be extremely, extremely interesting. I can tell you, as in America, here in Europe, and also in Germany, we'll be watching the news very, very carefully. On behalf of everyone, thank you and stay safe and be healthy. Bleib gesund. Good evening,
Thanks a lot.
Stay.
Stay
Wear
healthy.
your mask.
Thanks a lot, David. Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
An honor, Benjamin. Thank you. Stay healthy.